everybody. We are so glad that you can join us for week 4 of our Colossians Q&A. Mike, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, I mean, basically when you came to me and told me that, Tracy was only okay last week and I needed to come back to rescue the Q&A session, I thought, well, I'm here to help. I'm glad to be here. Glad to answer any of the questions. Now, Tracy did a great job. He did a great job of the message and the Q&A. Grateful for him stepping up and doing that. But yeah. I'm glad to be back here and be able to just have a conversation about our weekend and about chapter 4 of Paul's letter to the church in Colossae.
Awesome. Well, yes, Tracy did do a great job. And this last week, you did a great job at summing up this series. But can you just recap that message for us one more time, just so that we have it fresh in our minds?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think part of the setup I had for it was so often I have to fight this tendency that when it comes to the end of a letter or the end of a book, just to gloss over the closing. Because it's like, again, it's like the restating of, it's the goodbyes to the hellos. It's the restating of the argument, or, here's the points I made. And it's like, I read the letter, like, I don't need to read the conclusion. And so really forced myself to okay, what is Paul getting at in the totality of what he's writing? And I'm really glad I did, because there is just some gold that was found in chapter 4. And I think really gold that helps us navigate even the season that we find themselves in. We talked about being people of prayer, and specifically praying for opportunities to see the gospel impact people's lives and permeate our culture. And we talked about when we're praying for those, God brings us those opportunities, and how do we step into them with wisdom in a way that exudes grace, that we're seasoned with salt. I think that's how we engage with people is really important, and really how they receive or reject the promises of what Jesus can do for them and their lives. So that was kind of it was only a few short verses, but there was just some really, really profound stuff that Paul was talking about that I was glad I got to share.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was such a good message, and there was so much information that I think we all needed to hear. But one of the questions we got this week was about, our prayer life. You talked a lot about making sure that our prayer life is not about us. So what are some ways that we can start refocusing our minds, refocusing our prayer life, and making sure that is aligned with basically what Paul's been saying?
Yeah. So a great question. And I think I'm going to get there in a roundabout way, because I'm a preacher. So why say something in 1 minute if I can take 5 minutes saying it?
Exactly.
But, about 3-4 years ago now, a buddy of mine out of the blue was like, let's run a marathon. And I was like, that's stupid. Yes, let's do it. Let's run a marathon. And so I wasn't running outside of from the couch to the fridge. That was when I ran, for snacks at commercial breaks. But I knew that I could not go from where I was to running a marathon. Right. For me to get there, it was going to take months and months of training. And so literally over a 5-month period, running 6 days a week, constantly increasing and upping my miles to put me in a position where I can go out and literally run for half of a day. I had to work my way up there. And I think sometimes when it comes to things in our faith life, we go from 0 to 60. This is where I'm at, and then this is where I need to be. I want to be like Paul, whose prayer life centers around praying for gospel opportunity and gospel impact. But yet that's not where we're at. And so to take the same idea, how do we just take a step? And what if every day we just spent some time just saying, God, I just pray today that in real ways people would experience your truth and the truth of your son Jesus in their lives. And then it's you build upon it. And it's I pray that they experience that. And then God, you open me opportunities for me to step into that, to be a voice. God, I pray that you allow the impact of my life to expand beyond one person to, my whole team at work or my kids' sports teams. We build upon it, but we can't come from here to here.
Right.
So I would just say every day in your prayer, just take the simple step of asking God to use the message of his son Jesus to change someone's life today. Not even through you, just change someone's life today, because that's happening in and around us that we're not even aware of. Lives are being transformed, lives are being changed each and every day. And that's just part of us setting our hearts and minds around those things.
That's so good. Awesome. And then maybe just to expand upon that just a little bit, you obviously talked about like praying about others and stuff, but one of the other questions kind of was with that one, and that was, how can I get the courage to kind of step into making sure that I follow through with God opening a door in my life? Because I think a lot of times we tend to ask God for an opportunity, and then we're like, oh no, there's an opportunity. I don't know if I'm ready to step into this. Or maybe we just don't know where the opportunity is. We think maybe it's an opportunity, but we're hesitant in stepping into it. And maybe this kind of ties into a sermon you had a few weeks ago about just like, is it aligning with God? Is it aligning with his word? Like, can you just expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, every summer in this town I grew up with, I would go to the city pool. Like that was like summer hit. We went to the city pool, and I had a ton of fun memories growing up there. And the pool had like diving boards, and it had like this is the low dive board, and then this is like the medium height dive board, and then it was like this is the high dive board, right? And jumping off the low dive board, quite honestly, it doesn't prepare you for the medium dive board. And jumping off the medium dive board doesn't prepare you for the high dive board. I went through all those progressions, and I remember I was probably 12, 11, somewhere around there, and I climbed to the high dive board, and I stood at the edge of that board, and I felt like I stood there for 3.5 days. That's pretty much what it felt like. And I literally stood there, and the first time I turned around and walked back down, climbed back down the stairs, and I couldn't do it. And then the next day I was back there at the pool, and I built up a ton of energy, and I climbed back up. And at some point, you just got to jump. At some point, you have to jump. No one's going to force you to do it. No one's going to push you off. God's not going to open the door and shove you through the door. Like, you're going to have the courage to jump. But I'll tell you, after I jumped that first time, then the second time it was like, oh, let me jump, and then I'll do like a cool trick in the air. And like, I mean, like, again, 11-year-old trick. I think a cool trick in the air was like, I'm going to do like a this pose or something, you know? And then like by the end of the summer, it was like, let me do a cannonball. Because once you jump once, every time after that, it gets easier and easier.
That's true.
And to use the biblical reference, you know, Peter stepping out of the boat, you know, he didn't know fully what he was getting into. There was obvious fear. He took his eyes off of Jesus and he started sinking. But at some point, you got to step out of the boat.
Yeah.
And so like, there's not like a magic, I've got no special thing to say like, you know, rub your palms together and say 3 Hail Marys and you're good. Like, you just got to do it. So pray for those opportunities and be bold enough when they come to step through it. And I believe if God's going to open the door, God is going to bless your willingness to step out on his behalf. So just do it. Hashtag Nike. Copyright.
Oh my gosh.
Anyways.
And then the last question we have, you mentioned grace. And I think a lot of the times we think of grace as like the huge act of dying for us, like Jesus did. But I think we tend to forget about the little moments of grace that we can practically use in our day-to-day lives, or practically show in our day-to-day lives. So how can we start to show grace to those around us, whether that's in person, on social media? Because I feel like that's a huge one right now, especially. Just what are some practical ways we can start doing that?
Yeah, stop. Like, I think one of the most practical ways to get yourself in a place to begin to display grace is to just pause. Just stop and think, because we are so reactionary, right? It's like, man, I'm already thinking of my response to something with you before you even finish saying. I'm planning my retaliation or my reaction. But just pause. Just to take an intentional moment to pause. And we could all use a little space in our day. We're all running around too fast, too hurried. Pause and then just ask ourselves, how would I want someone to respond to me in this moment?
That's good.
Like when I mess up, how would I want someone to respond to my mistakes? And then reflect that back to the person. Like, my guess is most of us, like if someone cuts us off, we're not thinking in that moment, okay, I would really appreciate if I cut someone off right now for them to wave the middle finger at me and yell at me. That's what I will do to them. Like, we would think to ourselves, you know what? If I cut someone off, it was probably a mistake. And I would hope that they would see that people make mistakes. And so I'm going to respond to them and assume that it's the mistake. I'm going to believe the best. And I think that's so important. And pausing helps us put it out in the place where we can imagine ourselves doing that and say, okay, again, how would I want someone else to do this with me and for me? And so I think little things like that, we're not going to be perfect about it. So much happens in a day. There's times where like my kids will do something, I'll say something, and they'll walk away, and I'll think, why did I say that? Why did I do that? So we can't be perfect about it, but just a little bit of intentionality goes a long, long way. And I think that's it. Just a little intentionality in those moments. Stop, pause, reflect on what would you think or what would you want someone to say to you if you did that, and then respond accordingly. That's so good. Yeah, and if it's still a negative response, you're probably a bad person. I don't really know what to say with that. Like I'm like it's the,
or, maybe we should just take some time, reflect a little longer.
More time.
Maybe sleep on it.
Yes.
That's good. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who have sent in your questions and have been tagging along with us throughout this Q&A journey. But we have just wrapped up our Q&A series and Colossians series for this month or time period, I guess. But hey, we would love to invite you to our services online at 9 or 10:45 a.m. And you can find them at lakesawyer.online.church, or you can sign up to register for your spot at On Campus Church at 9 a.m. by going to lakesawyerchurch.org. Thank you, Mike, for joining us again. It's been
pleasure.
Awesome doing this with you. And to all of you out there, we hope to see you this week.